All right, so we are also now streaming live on YouTube.
Great.
All right, so I would like to begin the session. All right,
Okay.
so hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening to all the students, to all the teachers, educators, counselors, and parents who have joined us for the fourth webinar for the day today. And I welcome Sandy Kelly from Ithaca College, New York, who will be talking to us today about filling your profile and family section of the Common App. Before that, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Devika Agarwal from the Next Genius Scholarship Program. And as we know, Next Genius is a registered charitable trust in India that offers full and partial tuition scholarships to grade 12 students and also students who are in the gap year. And I'm very pleased to say that Ithaca is one of our Next Genius partner colleges, and our applications for 2020-21 has already begun. So please feel free to visit our website and apply for scholarships. Without any further ado, I would like Sandy to take over the presentation and take the session ahead.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And yes, I'm Sandy Kelly. I'm Associate Director at Ithaca College. I've worked in admission for probably longer than most of you have been alive and done international admission at a couple of institutions. So it's one of my passions, and I'm really thrilled to be able to answer any questions and help students as they're going through the process. As I get started, I'm going to share a screen for you. So hold on one second while I go to that. So as I mentioned, I am based in Ithaca, New York. And what I'm going to talk about today actually is related to the Common App in terms of the section for filling out your, hold on one second, I'm trying to get to the screen that I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Oh, the joys of technology, right?
Totally.
Okay, now can you see my PowerPoint?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Okay, so another way to think about this is why do they need to know this information about me? What is so important about knowing some of these details? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the process, but one thing it's kind of good to get the big picture, right? So the data in the profile and the family section is really to create a unique record for each student. So we need to be able to identify you specifically and have that record go throughout your process. We ask for demographic information, and that gives colleges and universities ability to understand probably more in total as an aggregate rather than about individual applications, the information about our applicants and admissions and then enrollees. So that's very important. And then think of it as you're providing information for the entire experience, not just for when you're applying. So we're asking some information in order to be able to provide experiences and communication in the application phase, in the admission phase, and maybe even the enrollment phase. So some of this information may not be of interest in the application phase, but would be of interest later on. And colleges and universities may refer to this information in order to provide information that may be of particular interest to you. It could be things like if citizenship, will we need to provide information about the visa process, and I'll go through some specific examples as we go through this. But again, we're we're wanting to support you. It's not that we're being nosy, it's about providing that kind of support. So I'm going to switch now my screen, hopefully fairly smoothly, and go to the actual Common Application sections. Okay, and hopefully that's visible, my test case in the Common Application. Good, great. So as we start, you'll see some things that are pretty expected. Your name, and this is important too because it creates the official record document. So naming conventions are somewhat cultural. So and of course the Common App is a US based application. And so we ask that students fill out this portion, and the first given name and the last family surname, the way that an official document lists them. It might be a passport, it might be a birth certificate. And you'll notice one thing in the Common Application where there's a red star or asterisk by that field. That's where the information is required. So you are required to submit that in order to submit your application. You'll notice the middle name is not required. I always encourage students to provide as much information as possible. If you don't feel you can accurately or don't want to provide the optional information, that's fine. But there are certain fields that are required. Preferred name. Sometimes people are like, well, that's interesting. What do they care? So this has to do with how a institution will likely communicate with you. Now, in this part, you'll see my given name on my documents is Sandra. I go by Sandy. And if I were filling out the Common App, I might put Sandy in there if I wanted to be addressed that way. And so you can decide if you want to put in a preferred name. Again, it's not required. Whatever you put in there, institutions will deal with it slightly differently. But for example, at the college, will always address you that way. So if I apply, they're going to send me information that says, Dear Sandy. And so you should put in a preferred or nickname if you're comfortable with people who you don't know addressing you. So if it's a family name of endearment, I wouldn't put it in there. But if it's, I know some people who don't actually ever go by their legal first name. And so it would be good to put that in there so that we know that to call you by a different name. The question about have you ever used any other names is a required question. And this has to do with legal names. So we want to be able to identify if we receive documents that may be under a different name than your current legal name. So only answer yes to this if you've ever had a different legal name. As an example, sometimes when people get married, they change their name. And so we need to know what their previous legal name was, so we make sure we understand when documents come in. And if you do have a former legal name, it asks you for more information. In terms of identifying male and female, this is required information. In the United States, institutions are asked to provide data to the US government about applicants and applicant enrollees so that we make sure we're not, we're providing services that are balanced gender-wise. So you will need to select one of those. And if there's anything that you want us to know beyond that, there's an open field for you to provide any additional information. Date of birth is also a required field because that is a key identifier. So typically when we're searching for a student, if we need to look up a record, we'll use date of birth as well as name. And you may get a birthday greeting on your birthday. So it's a nice benefit. So once you go through that, you get to address. Now, address is important for us and for other schools. Given the current situation, it's not as important, or even, you know, the change in communication modes over the past several years. We do not send a lot of detailed documents to students abroad because we know that mailing and delivery can be problematic. But at some point, particularly in the visa process, we will need to have that. So you have the ability to put in your permanent home address. And then if you want mail sent to an alternate address, say you're residing at a boarding school, you can enter that information there. Contact details. So we ask for a phone number, and it's fairly straightforward. When you enter your phone number, you're allowed to pick the country, which automatically populates the country code for the phone number, and then fill in the information. It's helpful to know if it's a home or a mobile. Put in the phone number that you want official messages to go to. If it's mobile, it may be text messages, it may be calls. I do recommend, I don't find this very often with international students, but if you're putting in a phone number, please make sure that if you have a voicemail response, that it's appropriate for admission office to hear that voicemail response. And then you have opportunities to add additional phone numbers if you want to be sure that if we're unable to reach you at one number, we have additional numbers for you. And then there are questions that are optional. And again, I don't think you need to feel compelled to answer any of these. It's fine to answer them. Rarely do these have an impact on the admission decision. It's more just gathering information. In terms of religious preference, at a school like Ithaca, we're non-denominational. We don't use this information in any specific way. Now, keep in mind, the CommonApp is an application for over 1,000 colleges and universities. So it's not that every institution is going to be looking at this information specifically. So for religious preferences, some institutions, for instance, if they are affiliated with a specific religious background, they may want to know that. They may, and it won't be a negative if you don't match that. It could be a, you know, something that they're interested in, having a diverse group of students. Obviously, most people will not have served in the U.S. Armed Forces, and so that's something you can answer if you're comfortable. Now, the information about ethnicity and race is particularly geared towards U.S. citizens. And again, we ask these questions because we are asked to report in aggregate, the percentages of students who meet certain criteria in the US. Some of these questions don't make a lot of sense for international students because, again, it applies mainly to US citizens. You can answer them if you want to. You don't need to. Again, this is a section that has less relevance for non-US citizens. And they are all optional. And the different pop-ups will come For instance, if you say you are Hispanic or Latino, then it will give you some options. And these are set to the US government's definition of ethnicity and race. So geography, this helps us understand and again, provide data on your specific information. And by putting in this information, it can provide us with some detail about your specific situation. And some of these are required where the city and country of birth, if you've lived in the US, how many years have you lived in the US? And again, it can be 0, so that is an option. And number of years you've lived outside the US. So this is helping us to understand, particularly if a student is going to need visa support at some point, and even beyond visa supports for a place like Ithaca College, we're looking at if a student may have US citizen or be a residency, but live abroad, maybe they don't need a visa, but perhaps transition services into the US. So again, keeping in mind that this is not just about the application process. This is your record that goes beyond application. And if you're thinking about enrolling to the specific college or university. And language. So this helps us understand also what services might need to be provided or what we even would require in terms of the English proficiency exams. So again, recommend that you fill this out accurately. I know many international students, particularly from India, are multilingual, and their language proficiency may vary. And so we just want to understand better how to make sense of that and not assume, like Ithaca College doesn't assume that every student from India will need to submit English proficiency exams. Some may, depending on their experience in the English language, either at home and or at school, but not everybody will. So this information allows us to accommodate multilingual students and provide information. So you can list the number of students you're proficient in and then provide details. So you might say, English is your first language, you feel you can speak right, and then whether it's spoken at home. If you then can choose another language and answer the same questions for that. And so this again provides a really good source. If I had added 5, I would get space to add 5 languages in there. So again, just be as accurate as possible. It helps guide in the admission office in terms of your experience and support that may be needed. But it's also, we're not going to hold you to this if you're just, we know that you're going to answer it to the best of your ability. Citizenship is next. And so citizenship helps us understand the process that you would need to go through in order to be a student. So for most people, this is pretty pretty easy to fill out. You would say you have options. You can be a dual citizen. You can be a US permanent resident, or sometimes what's referred to as a green card holder. So there's a lot of options. And so if you say other, you then will get information, be able to list information about where your citizenship lies. And then we want to know if you currently hold a valid US visa. For most students, this would not be true, but for instance, dependents of visa holders who are living in the United States fall under this category. And again, the reason to ask these questions helps us to create data and sort of run reports so that we know if you're admitted, if you're coming, what kind of support are you going to need? And it kind of directs, for instance, at Ithaca College, our Office of International Programs to be able to provide those services and reach out and connect with students. So it's really, and we also then provide data about that. I get asked all the time, how many Indian students, students with Indian citizenship attend Ithaca College. So this data helps us with that process. And then the last thing to talk about in terms of this section is the Common Application Fee Waiver. So this is dependent on somewhat dependent on which schools you're applying to. So every school, I believe, has the option to say the fee to apply, and it will be different from school to school, could cause a barrier for me. It would be a financial hardship. And so this is where you can say that, yeah, that would be a financial hardship. For Ithaca, and then some schools will have additional criteria where you could qualify for a fee waiver. So if you had Ithaca College as one of your schools to apply for, if you're not a US citizen, we waive the application fee automatically. So if you, in this section, or actually it's in the college section, which you'll learn about later, but there will be opportunities to learn more about fee waivers specific to the colleges that you're applying to later on. So this gives you an opportunity though to say if you want to be considered for a fee waiver based on financial information. Great, now we'll move on to the family section. So the family section, again, sometimes this gets into why do they need to know these things? And sort of generally, I would say for most applicants, we know that there is the applicant themselves, and then there is the family and supporters behind the applicant that are really going through the process together. And again, this is different in different cultures about how much family wants to be and chooses to be involved in particular information. But it helps us to understand family and supporter because families are complicated, and we can't assume that an applicant is connected to both parents, that both parents live in the same household. So these sections help us understand the family dynamic. So we have a little better sense of when we're communicating with supporters and families, who are the people connected directly to the student and how to make those connections. So again, much of this, some of this is required and some of this is optional. I encourage you to fill it out completely. For instance, at Ithaca College, we will send emails to family and supporters, sometimes copy emails, because we know that the one email that's associated with the applicant may be kind of overwhelming. The other thing that it helps us understand is the information on how to connect with you and where the parent lives. Occupation, employment status, that gives us a little bit of information if we need it. We may never go back to this information about the family's experience with college. So by asking the sort of employment that family and parents are doing and asking about educational experience helps us understand if the family is able to provide background, education to the student as they go through the application process, or maybe we need to provide additional. We have a term in US institutions called first generation students. And that refers to students where the applicant is the first generation that is attending college. And we are committed to providing access to first generation students, so we don't see that as a negative. But we also then may identify that student to form a connection with other students who are first generation, and maybe provide a little bit more detail and support to those students because they may need a little bit of information for the process. So it's really seen as a very positive thing that we're looking to help students as they go through the process. So this kind of information, it also lets us know if in terms of international, a parent has studied in the US, then they have that background. They may not need as much information about US institutions. I'm trying to remember if we're, and then you can put in 1, 2, again, blended families, have step parents, that kind of thing. And the same thing is helpful to us for siblings, because we know that if particularly an older sibling has gone through the process, the family probably has that information to support them. Okay, so that's the end of my section in the CommonApp. And I'll look forward to giving you more detailed information. I'm going to switch again to the slides and talk do a summary and then talk briefly about Ithaca College. So I'm going to. So in summary, the good news is this information is hardly ever used in terms of making the actual decision. I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of all the thousands of colleges and universities in the US, but I can tell you that it may never be referenced by any individual college. And most of this information is provided to help support students and for us to understand a little bit about our applicants. So don't worry about the section in terms of, should I answer that? Shouldn't I answer it? Answer it to the best of your ability and provide the information if you feel comfortable. And again, the reasons that it's going to be used is to understand your background, make sure we have an accurate file and documents in your file, and we can match documents so that the process goes smoothly. We can provide additional services that may be of particular interest given your background and data, and to be able to communicate with you effectively. So before we get to questions, I just want to say a little bit about Ithaca College. So we are located in the center of the state of New York in a city called Ithaca. We're about 4 hours from New York City. It's in a beautiful location. It's called the Finger Lakes. If you see my virtual background, it's looking from the top of our campus toward the lake called Cayuga Lake. And Ithaca is home. Ithaca, New York is home to both Ithaca College and Cornell University. So there's a very college town atmosphere. We have students coming from around the world to study in this community. So it's a very diverse international community. This slide gives you sort of the data information. We define ourselves as a medium-sized college with about 6,000 undergraduates. In the US, that's medium. We offered 98 different academic programs, and they're organized into the School of Business, School of Communications, School of Health Science and Human Performance, School of Humanities and Sciences, and the School of Music. So wide range of academic programs for us. And instead of going into information about why I think Ithaca College is amazing, which I do, and there's a lot of information that I can point to that will tell you why we think we're amazing, I thought it might be interesting to go through what others have said about Ithaca College. So this is kind of a list of recognitions from outside organizations that have recognized Ithaca College. One of the hardest questions when I do international recruiting is, what is your ranking? And in the United States, there is no one ranking service. So there is not an overall. There are probably hundreds of ways that colleges are ranked, and the criteria that are used are very different. So I always have trouble, and I always hesitate when I'm asked that question because I think it assumes there is one universal ranking. I'm not shy about where Ithaca College falls in those rankings or recognitions. We have been recognized. It's just that it's so different depending on what they're looking at. So you see in this sample, it's not complete at all, that we have been recognized by very national and international institutions in a number of different ways. The US News and World Report lists us for the 8th best college, 13th best value, 5 best for undergraduate teaching. We get recognized for being a very green college, outstanding plant-based dining services. We have student recognitions in terms of the bold and entrepreneurial students, the student engagement. And what I'm particularly proud of is that we have been recognized 2 years, they haven't come out yet for the last year, for top producer, faculty, and students who win the prestigious Fulbright Awards. So that goes to the strength of our academic experience as well as student engagement. There's a lot of very detailed, more comprehensive information on our website. I'd be glad to reach out to you. But for now, I just want to leave that and get to questions and answers.